Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio. I'm James Spencer. At Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. But this week, we are in Steve Wilkes' kitchen. We are shooting an episode of Basic Brewing Video, where we're going to talk about building a menu for a beer dinner. This is the special spring break edition of Basic Brewing Video. You can find us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And you can find our show on facebook.com/basicbrewing. And you can check out the amazon.com link on our page, basicbrewing.com, if you want to help support us that way. And you've just been sitting there sipping beer, Steve. Welcome.
Thanks, James, and I've got it like that.
Is that what the kids say nowadays?
Yeah, I got it like that. I'm sipping on, at the moment, a Diamond Bear Presidential IPA from our state capital, Little Rock. It's a very nice beer.
That's right. That's our only production brewery that's not associated with a brew pub in the state of Arkansas.
Yeah. So anyway, well, thanks for coming over today and hanging out with me on spring break.
Yeah, spring break. We use that term loosely.
Very loosely.
Yeah, the first day of spring, first and second day of spring, I guess, we got a combined like 14 inches of snow.
Yeah, this is the most snow I've ever seen. I've lived here for over 20 years. I've never seen this much snow. And so what can you say? I mean, it's just a big slushy mess out there. Because yesterday it's snowing 14 inches, and today it's melting off as fast as it came down because it's like 55, 60 degrees out there. Tomorrow's going to be in the 70s. But we're not here to talk about the weather because we can't do anything about that.
Well, the weather is germane, as they say.
Actually, it is because we had planned to brew. Mm-hmm. On my back porch, we were going to brew a nice porter, which we'll talk about in the context of today's show. But we were going to brew and do some cooking, and so we've been curtailed. We're just doing some cooking and some drinking. It's never a bad thing.
Yeah, we're actually doing that. We've changed gears on the Basic Brewing Video episode that we're shooting today. We were going to brew the porter and then talk about some food to go along with it. We're kind of switching gears. We're going to sip the homegrown organic corn American Pilsner that we brewed on the show a couple months ago.
Right. We're
going to pair that with some appetizers. But you are building a menu for a beer dinner. Tell us about that.
Okay, so on basicbrewing.com, we are all about not just beer, but we're also about pairing beer with food and promoting beer as, well, let's face it, an alternative to wine. That you can have a great meal that's built around beer rather than building it around wine. So my wife and I sold to her church a beer dinner based on home brews that I've been brewing specifically for this dinner. And so what we're going to talk about is how to go about conceiving of a menu. If you want to go to the trouble, as we did for this, of actually brewing beers specifically to the menu, or the other way around, you've got the beer and now you want to pick the food to go with it. I mean, you can approach this problem from either direction. In this case, we have a menu that is entirely based on seafood, and it's and entirely based on home brews. So, shall I just run down the menu really quickly with you, and then we can talk about where we're going to go with that?
Sure. Now, this was, to reiterate, this was part of a charity auction that That's you right. volunteered your services as a chef and a brewer to put together this dinner where it's going to be 6 or 8 people coming over to your house and eating your food and drinking your beer.
Yep.
So you get some karma points from that, I think.
I hope so. I sincerely hope so.
So, yeah, when you were talking to me about this and you told me about all the menu items and all the beers that you were going to cook for this, I was like, wow, that's a lot of cooking. That's a lot of brewing. So this is kind of a monumental undertaking.
Well, yeah, and the brewing is the biggest part of it, to be honest about it. But the menu itself is challenging in that seafood, of course, is not something that you can typically kind of make a casserole out of and throw in the fridge for later consumption. So the planning of it has to kind of you have to kind of hit the mark. Like if you're in a play, you have to land on your mark. And it's the same thing here. So actually today, what we're doing on the video side is we're preparing an oyster canapé and a crab and ricotta rieno, which is a stuffed sweet Italian chili or pepper that we're stuffing with ricotta cheese and blue lump crab meat. So that will be really good, we think, and it's in the oven right now. Actually, we know it will be good. And the smoked oyster canapé is just some oysters that we've poached in an ancho chili beer that we made during the Great Chili Experiment, if you saw that show. So I took a 12-ounce bottle of that ancho chili beer along with the liquor from the oysters. And these were canned oysters because it's that time of year. I couldn't get fresh oysters. And decided to play with the recipe. The original idea behind the recipe was to use a smoked oyster, which I may still do, but I decided today to go with as fresh an oyster or a fresh oyster taste, even though they're canned, but you get the idea. And so we used the liquor from that and 1 12-ounce beer. We poached those oysters back into that warm liquor with a couple of kind of just loosely pulled apart dried smoked chilies that my brother Mike grew. He grows peppers up in Missouri, and so he had given me a bag of these really nice hot peppers and a couple of those and a little cumin. Poached those for about 10 minutes in just a very lightly, almost boiling but not quite water, because you don't want oysters will fall apart. So poached 10 minutes, then I dunked them really quickly into a cold water bath, an ice water bath, to stop the cooking, and they're sitting there waiting now to be dressed. So, and then we made a fresh remoulade sauce with all kinds of goodies. You'll have to watch the video to get all the ingredients. We don't want to give it all away. But anyway, so you have a baguette, a French baguette, sliced thin, buttered on one side, with a couple of oysters on the top of that, and then the remoulade sauce spooned over that. Put it in the oven for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and hot oven, and it'll come out and be just really tasty. So that's one of the dishes.
So what are you thinking to pair with that?
For the dinner, we're going to pair that with a beer that I have yet to make.
Which we were supposed to be making today.
That's right. We're supposed to make that today, but we're going to pair that actually with what I'm calling a robust ancho chipotle porter. So it's going to have, here's how I describe this beer. A southwestern twist on a classic English beer, : dried fruit notes from ancho chili blended with the smoky earthiness of the chipotle and just enough heat to wake up the palate.
Well, there you go.
So it'll be a nice beer. And it'll work perfectly with the oysters. Now, unfortunately for today's video shoot, it's not so unfortunate, though, because it's a Samuel Smith's chocolate stout that we're going to pair it with. So that's not so unfortunate. But we wanted to stay with the kind of beer. Now, for the crab and ricotta rienos, we're going to pair that with the beer that we will be tasting on this show, which is our homegrown organic corn American Pilsner, which we used your LTLS system to make.
That's right. If you watched the previous episode of Basic Brewing Video, you saw us do a cereal mash, and you saw us do brew in the bag out on the patio, and brewed up that beer, and then that sat in the low-tech lagering system at 55 degrees for about a week for primary fermentation. Then I brought it down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit and lagered it for, I believe, 3 weeks after that, and then bottled it. I went through. I'm interested for you to taste that beer. We haven't. You'll be tasting it on camera for the first time, but I kind of scared myself on that beer because I put some yeast in the bottling bucket because I thought, a lot of the yeast would have been flocculated out over that lagering time. So I wanted to make sure that it had enough yeast in suspension to do proper bottle conditioning. So I added some fresh yeast at bottling time, and about a week later I tasted it, and a lot of the yeast was still in suspension. and I got a big, kind of butterscotch diacetyl hit.
Yikes.
And I thought, oh my goodness, that wasn't there when I tasted it at bottling time. I've ruined the beer. But it's been in the bottle for, 2 or 3 weeks? I don't even know.
Oh, longer than that even. Yeah.
So, but now it's crisp and clean, and the yeast has done its job in the bottle, and it's settled out, and now I can't wait for you to taste it. It's going to be a very tasty beer. So, so how many courses are we talking about here?
Let me count the ways. Well, the appetizers, there are 2 appetizers. There's a smoked oyster canapé, which we've talked about, and the crab and ricotta Rieno, which we've talked about a little bit. And we'll talk about those at depth on the video side. And then followed, so that's when everybody's kind of standing around and having an aperitif. And I'm thinking that the American Pilsner that you just described and the Porter that I just described, those are the beers that I'm pairing with those 2 appetizers. Then when we sit down to eat, we'll start with a soup, and it's a lobster bisque, and we'll stay with one of those 2 beers, whichever one that someone wants to go with for those. So that's what I have in mind. The next course is a salad course, and that's going to be a crab and mango salad, and I'm going to use just some very lightly steamed and chilled king crab legs, chunked up, pretty big chunks, with equally big chunks of mango, a little cilantro, probably a little diced jalapeno, and serve that over greens with a blood orange vinaigrette. And we'll pair that with a German-style Hefeweizen that I added a pound of flaked rye to.
Huh.
So a little bit of rye in the Hefeweizen, otherwise a very straight-ahead German wheat beer, but a little rye. And that'll pair up with that. I'm hoping the beer is still in the primary fermenter. I just made it. But it should come out with some nice banana and clove, about 15 IBUs, really a nice salad beer.
Mm-hmm.
And it should pair very well with the mango and the crab, and very light, easy flavors. So that'll take us into the entree, which is a vanilla coconut-infused shrimp, along with seared habanero scallops. And both of those will be tied together with a tomatillo cream sauce, where I'll take some tomatillos. I'll cook those down with a little garlic and a little onion and probably some green chilies, and let that cook down, and then puree that into a really clear or smooth sauce in and of itself. Put it through a fine sieve, and then I'll blend that back in with some Mexican-style table cream, and then adjust the heat as I feel like it needs to be adjusted, with a little habanero, a drop or two, just to get the heat where I want it, because I want a little bite. But the cream will really soften that. And then I'll serve both the shrimp and the habanero scallops. And when I say habanero scallops, I mean that I'll have some nice olive oil in the pan. I'll sear the scallops, and I'll have some deveined and deseeded habanero, which I'll dice or julienne and put in the pan with them, so you'll get those flavors together. Let that just get nice and brown on both sides and creamy in the middle. Serve that over grilled polenta with the tomatillo cream sauce, and that's the entree. So we'll serve that with we'll pair that, I should say, with a Bluebird, I'm calling it Bluebird Creek, that's what we call our creek, Bluebird Creek Honey Ale.
Ah.
And it's just a really traditional English-style ale that has 3 pounds of honey in the 5-gallon batch. So it's got a lot of honey in it, should be really, really luscious, and should pair up really good. The sweetness and the maltiness of that beer ought to pair well against the heat that the entree will bring to it.
And we had that. Is that the beer that we sampled a couple of minutes ago?
We did. Yes, we did sample that, yeah.
It's very good.
Thanks.
The honey, I think, I was getting a couple of notes of ginger in there. It was interesting. Was it a wildflower honey?
It's a local. It's called a clover honey, but it's a wildflower honey. It's not just clover honey, or I should say, big big manufactured honey. You know, it's definitely got a whole lot of different flowers in it.
But it's very nice, and you could see where it would pair well with that.
Yeah, and I think it's only been in the bottle for 2 weeks, so it will continue to mellow and kind of get a little rounder. And but it's a great beer as it is right now. And then for dessert, we'll have a cherry black walnut brownie with some homemade vanilla ice cream, and we'll pair that with a barley wine that I made. I'm calling that Ozark barley wine,
which I have right here in front of me.
Yes, you do. And I hope that I hope you like it. I think you do because you're finishing it off even as we speak. Mm-hmm. But I'm describing that as deep, luscious, malty, dried figs, raisins, although I'm not getting a lot of raisins from this. I might need to change the description a little bit. A little black pepper, a little vanilla, and I used noble hops, so I'm leaving it at that.
Now, I was thinking you were saying of Amarillo hops.
Oh, you're right. I'm mixing up my beers. This dinner has 5 different beers in it, and I'm getting confused. You're right. It's straight Amarillo. It's 4 ounces of Amarillo.
Yeah.
So it's not terribly hoppy beer. It doesn't just blow you away as a hop bomb. It isn't me anyway.
No.
But it should be a great dessert beer. I think it already is, but it'll continue to mellow and be good in the bottle.
It is the thing that the Amarillos bring, and you did some at the beginning of the boil, some midpoint through the boil, so you're not getting all of that bitterness from the Amarillos, but there's enough citrusy flavors left over from those Amarillo hops that it lightens up this beer, and it's a pretty big beer. But it is not like a raisiny barley wine, which is just fine. Yeah. It's a kind of a bright citrusy barley wine, which I think will go well with clearing the palate from the brownie and the ice cream. And it's something that you can end without being so heavy at the end of the dinner.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And one of the things I was thinking about as I built this menu, and this maybe gets back to your opening point, was how do we talk about building a menu, a beer dinner menu? And I'm not quite sure where I started. I hear something boiling.
You want to check that real quick?
Nothing's on, so it's just water dripping from outside.
It's all the
melting snow.
The melt. It's that spring melt here in Arkansas.
That's right. Anyway, I was thinking about the process of building this menu, and at some point, as I was thinking about it, I thought I want to do seafood. Mm. So that was a decision that I made. That was a limitation that I put on myself. So I decided I would do all seafood. There's no meat in here. Mm. And then I started thinking about the beers that would go with it. And I didn't want to go with beers I'd already made. I didn't want to do craft beers. I really wanted to do a homebrew dinner. So I determined that I would brew the beers that would go with these foods. And I just started thinking about and looking at my cookbooks and thinking about things I'd made in the past. Most of these dishes I've made a number of times before under one guise or another. But I'm the kind of a cook that I don't write much down. And I don't measure very much. So every time I make a dish, it's a little bit different, and it probably gets back to being a musician. So every time I play a song, it's a little bit different. It's kind of that same thing, which is why I'm probably a terrible contest brewer, because I probably never make a beer the same way twice. But at any rate, I made some decisions about it, and I wanted to do a pretty standard kind of menu with an appetizer, a soup course, a salad course, an entree course, and a dessert course. So it's a 5-course meal, to the short answer to your question. And then as I thought about the dishes that I wanted to make, I began to think, well, if I was going to have a beer with that, what would I want? That's really how I came up with it. Now, there's a lot of rules that you can start talking about. You can talk about contrast or complement. You want to, sometimes you want to cut the fat. Sometimes you want to be luscious and kind of layer with it. Sometimes you want to contrast the flavor. The things that I think you have to be really careful of is using kind of extreme ingredients. So my favorite one to talk about is chilies. If you get carried away with if you have a hot entree, a hot dish. So for instance, the entree for this has the potential to be pretty warm in the mouth. So you've got some habanero going on there. Now, I'm not going to blow people's palates out. I'm not going to scare people away. But there's going to be some heat in that dish. You would not want to serve a hot chili beer with that.
Right.
And you might think, well, that complements it. On paper, yeah. But what you're going to do is you're going to blow people's palates out, and they're not going to be able to eat it. On the other hand, and you also, by that same token, you wouldn't want to have a beer that has a lot of alcohol heat. Mm-hmm. Because if you've got that alcohol heat that just really inflames the chili, you're not doing yourself any favor there. So you have to find a way to contrast and to kind of settle those chilies down and bring everything into balance. I mean, I really think that balance is really important. And so, I think back to discussions and readings that I've had from Randy Mosher, literally pamphlets that the Homebrewers Association has put out, and I've just kind of digested that over time. I highly suggest that you all get a hold of those if you don't have them already, and just think about the flavor of the food. If it's a bright, light, fresh flavor like a crab and mango salad, you really want a light, bright beer to go with that. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to serve that with a big, Bigfoot barley wine, because you'd completely trample on your food. So think about either complementing your flavors or contrasting them to some degree, and then you'll be okay.
And we discovered, I attended a beer dinner here at your house before, where we brought a very challenging beer that I talk about a lot, New Belgium's La Folie, which is a very sour beer.
Yeah.
And where most people, when they taste that alone, they make the horrible face and they say, this is the awfulest stuff in the world. How do you drink it? But you paired it with something that made even my wife enjoy. I mean, she's tasted La Folie by itself, but even she was able to enjoy that beer in combination to the dish that you brought.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we paired that up with just some grilled andouille sausage that we had skewered onto some rosemary skewers, and we had made a really light Creole mustard sauce to kind of dip with that. And some people did that and some people didn't. But just, that sausage complemented that flavor of that Flemish red ale or brown ale, and it paired beautifully. And I was remembering a friend of mine, musician friend of mine, Claudia Burson, who tasted it, and she was the last person I would think would like this. Susan, too, your wife. Mm-hmm. And they were both like, this is really good, and I didn't think I would like this. Mm-hmm. So finding the right flavor combinations with the right food paired with the right beer, and you're in like Flynn. On the other hand, let me tell you a horror story, and I may have told this already at one point, but I was so excited about finding Avery's Hog Heaven barley wine, discovering it some years ago. And I love that beer. I could be a session beer with that. It's such a good beer. At any rate, I was so excited about it, and I had my brother down from Kansas City. We grilled a couple of steaks. I was really excited about sharing this beer with him, and he's kind of he was at the time a newbie to craft beers and homebrews. Disaster, because it was too big. It was not the right beer for the meal. It blew his palate out instantly, and he didn't like the beer. It was the wrong beer for what we were doing, and it was at the wrong moment. I was so excited about this beer that I had kind of gotten, my palate had gotten adjusted to. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to be careful. If you're, for instance, with this dinner that we're doing, the folks that have purchased this dinner, this charity dinner, to my knowledge, none of them are homebrewers. And none of them are really beer people. They're wine people, to be sure, and I know most of these people fairly well, and know that they really understand and know good wine. They like beer. They want to know more about it. So I feel like I've been given kind of a really nice responsibility to really introduce them into how do you really go about drinking and understanding the flavor profiles of these very different kinds of beers with this very different kind of, I mean, it's all seafood, but I've got a lot of flavors going on here, and I've got very light flavors, and I've got some big imposing flavors going. So I really want to tread lightly on their palates, and I want to bring them through all these flavors in a way that they will, frankly, that they'll enjoy. I don't want someone to sit at my dinner table and say, "Oh, that's kind of good. Do you have any Chardonnay?" Yeah. I don't want that to happen.
Well, I don't think you'll have that issue with these beers and with the food pairings. I mean, with that previous beer dinner, one attendee, also named Susan, when she drinks beer, she drinks like Miller Lite, right?
Miller High Life.
Miller High Life.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the dinner, I mean, admittedly, the last two beers that we served were New Glarus Raspberry Tart and Wisconsin Belgian Red. But at the end of they were just rolling their eyes, and they were just amazed by how good beer could be. And I can't remember that she disliked any of the beers that we served during the meal. So I think food helps bring people into the good beer fold, because by itself, it may be a bit of a ramp up from what they're expecting beer to be. Yeah. But paired well with good food, I think the complementary relationship between those can help them discover something new, and maybe the next time that they go to the beer store, maybe they will try something new. Maybe they will, try something other than the big boy beers. Yeah,
for sure. And not just going to the liquor store or the package store, depending on what part of the country you live in, but when you go out to a restaurant, that you might say, you know what, I'm going to have this, vanilla coconut infused shrimp, and I think maybe I'll try that with a Stella Artois, or some beer that you're going to find on tap somewhere. And so to begin to think about that, malted beverages, beer, pairs much more readily with food than most wines. Although I love wine and drink my fair share of it with meals, but if you begin to experience the tremendous variety of flavors that are available in beer, compared to the rather limited taste profiles in wines, you'll find that you can pair up a beer with a salad, for instance, much easier than you can pair a beer with a wine. I mean a salad with a wine. So I'm hopeful that when this particular dinner is over with, that everyone will have a good time, that everyone will be exposed to some flavors that they hadn't expected before, both from the beers and from the food, and that that the folks that join us will come away from it thinking that the next time they go out to dinner, a beer might be appropriate. And if we do that, then we've done something.
Now, how do you structure? There's a physical limitation to the amount of people or the amount of food that people can intake, but there's also a safety issue with giving people a lot of alcohol in one sitting, where you may have some pairs of people where one may not be the designated driver. I mean, have you got that measured into the design of this menu as well? I mean, how are you going to meter both the food and the beer so that it doesn't blow out either of those parameters?
Well, I think one of the things that'll happen on a dinner like this is that this is an evening. It's a long evening. A really good meal with really good friends shouldn't be, slammed down in 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Americans were pretty used to doing that. And even at nice dinners, nice gatherings that I've been to, once the food is served, I've seen people just literally shut up and eat for about 20 minutes or 15 minutes and just shovel it down, because that's what we're used to doing. My plan for something like this would be that the courses would come out over a fairly lengthy period of time, and that food and wine and beer and spirits should be consumed with friends over time, because that sure beats the heck out of watching reruns of Monk on TV. And otherwise, that's what we're doing.
And you're going to be preparing these meals literally in front of them. You're going to be in the kitchen here, cooking some of these dishes, right? So there is a time, and you're not going to give every person 12 ounces of every beer.
Yeah, no. I mean, to approach it that way. I mean, I think that, with the appetizer, I'm hopeful that everyone will sample each one of the beers. I'm not going to make people, I don't like that. I'm not going to make somebody, but it's not, we're not going to be militant about it. But if you bought into this dinner, then you bought into it with the idea that you're wanting to experience some different flavors. So I'm hopeful that everyone will sample a few ounces of each one of these beers. But I would think that, you're looking at, let's just pretend for a moment that you're looking at about 12 ounces for the appetizer and soup course. So a beer that you would drink, and then maybe you drink 4 or 5 ounces of the porter and 4 or 5 ounces of the Pilsner with the different appetizers. And then, you move on and you have a little bit of the Hefeweizen. But keep in mind, the Hefeweizen is a very light beer. It's only going to be about 3.5% beer. So there's not a whole lot going on alcohol-wise with that beer. The rest of the beers are all respectable in terms of the amount of alcohol that are in them, if you're just looking at that answer. But we're looking at a 3 to 4 hour meal where you're slowly sipping a few ounces of beer every now and then. So the idea is that not at the end of the dinner that, I want you to be relaxed and comfortable and well fed and happy, but I would expect that everyone any one of the guests could get in the car and drive home. And if we find that's not the case, then obviously we'll do something about that. But I believe one of the things that I really rail against is the idea that beer is something to get drunk on. Mm-hmm. I really have a problem with the way that beer is advertised in America, that it shows a bunch of happy, smiling, very thin people drinking a lot of beer at the beach, at the ball game, wherever they're at. And the fact is that, and you can get me off my soapbox in a minute, but the fact is that if you drink a whole lot of 5% beer or 4.5% beer, at the end of the day, you're going to be too drunk to drive. You won't have had a good time, not really. And you won't come away with that with any experience other than a lot of alcohol and a lot of calories that you didn't need. On the other hand, with an experience like this, hopefully you've come away with an expanded palate, with a really congenial time with friends, with family, and good food and really interesting flavors that you're not going to get anywhere else. There's nowhere else you can get this kind of combination of flavors. And so I would kind of challenge our homebrew colleagues out there to take a look at doing something like this for their family or for their friends. And it can be formal or it can be relaxed. But, brewing isn't, to me, we're in a different world than the, buy an 18-pack of Strohs and then go out and have a good time. That's just not what we're about. So I expect that from this dinner, someone will drink more than others and may get a buzz out of it, for sure. I don't have to drive, so maybe I will. Maybe I'll be that person. But hopefully we've balanced the flavors, we've balanced the alcohol content, and the length of time that will allow everyone to really enjoy the meal, enjoy the beers, and leave happy and satisfied, but not in danger of having an accident.
Well, there you go. And we will be exploring this menu on upcoming episodes of Basic Brewing Video. We're going to start with the appetizers, and we'll take you through the different courses with the different beers and talk about not only, how the food is made, but how the beer was made. And by the end of it, maybe you can replicate something similar to the experience that happened, will have happened. Is that future perfect?
I don't know.
At
Don't get mad at me, Mr. Reed.
that shall have happened.
Yeah.
That's future perfect imperative, right? Anyway, maybe you can get something out of it and put something on for your family and friends, and we hope you do, because beer does get a bad reputation out there. Even among people who are discovering craft beers, a lot of people are just looking at the ABV number on there and saying, yeah, this is a good beer.
Yeah.
I can drink a lot of that, or whatever. So anyway, beer is food, and it's nice to put good beer with good food, and we look forward to the upcoming episodes of Basic Brewing Video.
Yeah, we'll just run right through this menu. So our next show that will feature this menu, we'll do the lobster bisque. And hopefully by that time we'll be able to pair that with a robust ancho chipotle porter, he said.
Nothing is ever simple.
Nothing is ever simple. And, nowadays you have to list every ingredient in the menu. It can't just be burger and fries. It's got to be 80% Angus beef with 15% fat.
Well, that's how you get the price tag up.
Exactly.
You charge by the word.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Steve. This has been a fun spring break edition of Basic Brewing Radio. Good information and equally important, easy for me to put together so I can spend some time with my family.
Absolutely.
On this spring break. So, thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, James.
And I guess I should say the things at the end. You can find us at basicbrewing.com. You can find our DVDs, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, and Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and our Introduction to Wine Kits DVD, and Steve's wonderful 2010 Brewer's Logbook still out there, along with our shirts and all that. You can find out who sells our stuff at basicbrewing.com as well. And if you can't find a vendor in your area, you can go to visit basicbrewingshop.com. We appreciate your support in all the ways that you support us, and we hope that you are having a great spring break with your family as well. Cheers, everybody. We'll see you next week.